It's Baltimore's time. And I want to say that loud and clear for anybody, especially in Washington, D.C., who might not hear me. If you are not willing to be part of the solution, keep our names out of your mouth. Donald Trump, if you are not willing to walk our communities, keep our name out of your mouth.
My friend, you do not want to know where that mouth has been. But that obviously is the comparatively classy Maryland Governor Wes Moore. He appeared on Face the Nation this morning as Donald Trump continues his campaign of harassing governors in the states that he doesn't like. Now, as you're about to see, Wes Moore cracks down on Trump's phony crime crackdown, his troop deployment ploy, and a stunning admission of Maryland's response to Texas redistricting. Packed a lot in. So let's get right to it. We're going to start with the governor's response to this early morning Trump truth trifle. As you're about to see, Wes Moore drops bombshell after bombshell during this interview. Here's the first volley. Stick around. There's other explosive stuff coming up.
We know the president watches the program, and he likely saw the guest listing because he's tweeting about you, or truthing, I guess. He says the governor, Wes Moore of Maryland, has asked in a nasty and provocative tone that I walk the streets of Maryland with him. And he's talking about crime-ridden Baltimore. It's quite lengthy, but he goes after your record on crime. He says it's a bad one. He says if you need help, he will send in the troops, which is being done in nearby D.C. I mean, when we saw a few weeks ago the deployment on the streets of Los Angeles, the governor of California tried to go to the courts, and he was unable to stop it. Is the reality here is you can't stop the president from sending troops to Baltimore if he wants to.
The year before I became the governor, in 2022, Baltimore was averaging almost a homicide a day. And I came in and I said, I refuse to be a governor who just offers thoughts and prayers to this situation. So we said we're actually going to work in partnership with Mayor Scott, work in partnership with local elected officials, work in partnership with local law enforcement. We made the largest investments in local law enforcement in our state's history, over $50 million going to Baltimore City alone.
That came from federal money.
That came from both federal and state money. And also, Maryland became one of the only states that actually helps to fund the U.S. attorney out of balance sheet, taking many of those gun crimes and actually turning them into federal charges. And the results have been incredibly encouraging, where Maryland has had amongst the fastest drops in violent crime of anywhere in the United States in the past 2.5 years. Yeah. The homicide rate in Maryland is down over 20% since I have been the governor. And the last time the homicide rate was this low in Baltimore City, I was not born yet. And so the reason that I've asked the president to come and join us is because he seems to enjoy living in this blissful ignorance, these tropes and these 1980 scare tactics. And, you know, just last week I was in Baltimore, and I was with a group called We Are Us, who's a violence intervention group. And they say, we're all we got, we're all we need. And that's exactly how people in this community feel. Because while the president is spending his time from the Oval Office making jabs and attacks at us, there are people actually on the ground doing the work who know what supports would actually work to continue to bring down crime, but it's falling on deaf ears of the president of the United States.
Okay, in fairness, let's not forget, he was not shot in that ear, so maybe there's some phantom deafness or something. Well, that was an elegant rebuke to the president who parties with pedophiles, but it gets better. Here's bombshell number one from Wes Moore from earlier today on Face the Nation.
Here in D.C., there are guardsmen from 6 different states on the street. The mission is, quote, beautification, duty, and support. The defense secretary has authorized them to carry M4 and M17 rifles, but to date, we have not been able to locate anyone armed within the National Guard on the streets of D.C. Why, though, are you so opposed to this deployment?
Well, there's plenty of reasons. One, it is not sustainable. You cannot continue this type of pace of operations, particularly when it's costing over $1 million a day in order to do this. The second, it's not scalable. You're not going to be able to do this in every single major American city, particularly when many of the cities that have the highest crime rates are the places that have actually deployed their National Guards to Washington, D.C. So who's going to go do the work in their cities? The third, it's unconstitutional. It's a direct violation of the 10th Amendment, and if for a party that talks about state rights, it's amazing how they're having such a big government approach in the way they're conducting public safety. The fourth reason is because it's deeply disrespectful to the members of the National Guard. You know, as someone who actually deployed overseas and served my country in combat, to ask these men and women to do a job that they're not trained for is just deeply disrespectful. And so when we're thinking about all of these lasting factors, when we're thinking about the fact that it serves as a distraction from the fact that the president's disastrous economic policies are making everything everything more expensive for everyday Americans, is making life harder for everyday Americans. There is a multitude of reasons that I am against this, and I will not authorize the Maryland National Guard to be utilized for this.
No troops for you. Well, it gets better. As I promised, here's our featured Trump bunker-busting bombshell when pressed about Texas gerrymandering. Get a load of this from Bronze Star recipient Governor Wes Moore.
Redistricting, or gerrymandering, as some people know it. You've said you don't like talking about it, but all options are on the table when it comes to your state. There's only one seat here that is actually Republican, and it's a seat held by Representative Andy Harris. Are you considering trying to redraw lines in Maryland?
Yeah, when I say all options are on the table, all options are on the table.
Are you actively looking at it now?
Yeah, because I think we have to. Yes, and I think we have to, because I think what's happened is this is what people hate about politics in the first place: the fact that the president of the United States, very similar to what he did in Georgia, where he called up a series of voter registrants and said, "I need you to find me more votes." We're watching the same thing now, where he's calling up legislatures around the country and saying, "I need you to find me more congressional districts."
He's doing it. That may be different, but Democrats redistrict. You know this.
Yeah.
But Gavin Newsom's doing it right now. A few years ago in New York, we saw this. This can backfire. Do you really want to go down this road?
I want to make sure that we have fair lines and fair seats, where we don't have situations where politicians are choosing voters, but that voters actually have a chance to choose their elected officials. We need to be able to have fair maps. And we also need to make sure that if the President of the United States is putting his finger on the scale to try to manipulate elections because he knows that his policies cannot win in a ballot box, then it behooves each and every one of us to be able to keep all options on the table to ensure that the voters' voices can actually be heard, and we can have maps.
You don't think in that one district where they have a Republican representative, that they are actively being represented in Maryland?
I think if you look at maps across the country, less than 10% of congressional seats are actually competitive by nature. Less than 10%. And so if you look at the average win margin in our state and so many states, the average win margin is upwards of 20 to 30%. So that means we already have so many gerrymandered areas that we have to be able to add a measure of fairness in the way that it's applied. And so, yes, all options need to be on the table in the state of Maryland.
Man, that's a very serious guy, a veteran, a patriot, and an outstanding person by all accounts. Now, on the other side of the coin, happy birthday to Vincent Kennedy McMahon, a guy cut from the same lecherous cloth as your reigning POTUS. They're both Hall of Famers for litigating their way out of accountability for their heinous behavior.
And to have Mr. McMahon be the one inducting you, how does that feel?
Well, it feels great, and Vince is an amazing man. He really is.